Hey there, everybody. This is Alexis Ward, and welcome to 12 Faces Psychology. So today's video is going to be talking about addiction. And that doesn't have to be substance abuse. There are many different types of behaviors that we get addicted to. So really this just refers to any type of behavioral pattern that is no longer serving you, that has become compulsive to some extent. So let's get into it here. I got 5 tips for you today on how to work with compulsions, because we are in this COVID situation here, and I'm seeing with my clients, I'm seeing with people in my life that there is a lot of COVID compulsion, a lot of COVID consumption going on. People are eating and drinking and buying their anxiety away, essentially. So I hope that these 5 tips can kind of be helpful to anyone that's having a difficult time working with their emotions and utilizing some unhealthy coping mechanisms right now. Okay, so number 1 is understand the addiction cycle. If you can understand the cycle of addiction, how that works, how each phase feeds into the next, then you can begin to really understand where you're headed, If you're seeing, oh, I'm here in the cycle, this is where I'm headed to, you bring awareness to that process. You bring awareness to the addictive mentality, and you begin to be able to find your way out of it, or to at least make conscious choices around how you want to move forward. So when I say the cycle of addiction, there are actually many different frameworks for looking at that. The one that I utilize with clients the most and like the best, basically, we're going to start with substance abuse. So you're using some kind of a substance. It doesn't have to be that, though. It could be shopping. It could be sex. It could be any kind of thing, right? Anything that is sort of an unhealthy coping mechanism. You've got use going on. Then you're starting to lose control. You've gone from that, this is cool, I'm just having 1 glass of wine every now and then, to, oh, now I'm having 4 glasses of wine every single night. I'm having trouble stopping. I might be losing control of this situation. After the loss of control, you move into a stage of guilt from overuse, basically, where you're just kind of realizing like, shit, I've totally lost control of this thing. My life is starting to feel really heavy and unmanageable. It's getting dark. I'm feeling guilty, I'm feeling ashamed, I'm going through denial, all sorts of stuff. Sort of, that's like the churning place of this experience, right? So then you start to move into cessation of use, where all the emotional turmoil, all of this stuff, you've made the connection, this is a result of this unhealthy behavior pattern, so let me put a stop to it right now. And then you do. Then a little time passes, right? And we start to have some internal frustration brewing. Life just doesn't feel as exciting. I'm antsy. I'm uncomfortable in my own skin. I'm bored. I don't know how to deal with these feelings, kind of stuff going on. And so then as that builds, that internal frustration becomes fantasizing about whatever the unhealthy behavior pattern is, starting to dream, oh gosh, well, what would it be like if I just had 1 glass of wine? What would it be like? I mean, I could probably handle that. I can do it. This time I'm going to do it. This time it's going to be fine. And then we move into the obsessing phase, where it's no longer just a casual fantasy. It's now something you're thinking about all the time. And it's become an obsession. Obsession leads to compulsion. So that's sort of where the cycle goes right back into itself, and you start with substance abuse or whatever the behavior pattern is again. And you kind of cycle through that repeatedly. So if you can understand that about yourself and you start to notice, oh wow, I'm starting to fantasize about doing this thing that I know was really negative for me and brought a lot of darkness and heaviness into my life, but here I am starting to romanticize it again. What feelings was I avoiding in that moment where I started to fantasize instead of being with what I was feeling in the moment? So that is going to bring us to number 2, which is to sit with your emotions. When you're in that part of the cycle where you're having the internal frustration come up, where you're fantasizing, where you're obsessing, let those things be red flags for you that allow you to understand that you're dealing with some emotion that's uncomfortable for you, and that's basically an escape mechanism. So if you can start to identify what that emotion is, and typically, sometimes somebody's really going through something, right? And there's like sadness or grief or whatever other things. But a lot of times, if somebody has like a long-term addiction or a serious substance use pattern that's just recurring throughout their life, usually the things that I'm hearing that somebody's working with are anxiety, boredom. I say those actually are the two most predominant things that I hear. Not like deep sadness, not deep trauma, even though there might be those things too, but sort of the most superficial layers of this that most people are in touch with and aware of are their anxiety and their boredom. And those are not things that people sit with easily. So in order to really master this process and get a hold of yourself on a permanent basis, you've got to learn to get comfortable with that experience. Got to learn to get comfortable with being anxious. Be okay with that. Not have to step outside of it, but just step into it and go, okay, what am I afraid of in this moment? Let me go deep into my fear. Let me lean into that and go inside of it as much as I can. Really, really bring my fear to a climactic place where it can be saturated and allowed to release, because that emotion wants to flow through you. But when you're resisting it, either through avoidance using some type of behavior pattern or substance, or you're denying it, it's not flowing, it's stuck. So we want to unstick that basically by having you go in there and allow yourself to have the full experience of that emotion so that it can be satiated and released. All right, so number 3 is identify your triggers. Most people have certain circumstances, certain specific emotions, certain events that they associate with whatever this use pattern is. So let's say it's smoking, right? A lot of people say, I love to have a cigarette after I have a meal. So there's an association there between having a meal and having a cigarette. So if you can identify the different places in your life that you are getting triggered to go back into this unhealthy behavior pattern or substance use, you can start to prepare yourself for that. After a meal, have your gum in your pocket or have something else that you do instead. Maybe you go for a walk after every meal. But we're wanting to figure out ways that you can prepare yourself for success rather than just kind of all of a sudden being in the experience of, oh, I'm having a meal and now I'm triggered and I want a cigarette. So know what your triggers are so that you can set yourself up for success by figuring out ways to either compensate for or replace whatever the negative behavior pattern might be. All right, number 4 is to replace unhealthy patterns with healthy patterns. So this is more on like a large scale, where if you have been, say, a habitual shopper, let's go with that one. So you are sort of addicted to shopping and you want to replace that with something else. Well, let's find something else you could do. Maybe there's a way you could earn money instead of spending money that becomes sort of an addiction. Maybe you find a hobby. Maybe you become a YouTuber, right? So look for ways that you can put something into your life that's actually going to give you the benefits and the rewards that you're looking for, rather than just a short-term cessation of whatever feelings you might be avoiding. All right, now number 5 is keep getting back up. And there's so much shame, there's so much guilt, there's so much self-judgment that can be associated with addictive patterns of behavior that often when somebody gets knocked off of the wagon, when somebody, falls off and starts doing something that they know is not healthy for them again, they just stay down there because they go into all of that grief and remorse and despair. So don't beat yourself up about it. Guide yourself gently back up onto the path. And that's the practice, right? Is when you find you're out of balance, you gently guide yourself back into balance. It's not about beating yourself up. It's not about subduing yourself through self-judgment and castignation. It's about being loving with yourself, it's about being gentle with yourself, and it's about having determination and commitment to returning time and time again to a place of balance and self-love. All right, I hope this has been helpful for you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.